Let chag einach Shirley Kendall you had do a sock. Can get einach shark sani keek you had do a sock. Kagwantan na hatsiti, dakdaintan yadi ayachat. Huna kau ayachat, einkrit echat yati. My name is Shirley Kendall. My Tlingit name is Shark Sani Keek. I'm of the Kagwantan clan. My father is Dakdaintan from the Raven's Nest House in Hoona. I was born and raised in Hoona, but I live here in Anchorage. The Raven story has been told by many people in Southeast Alaska where the Tlinkits live. And some of the stories are meant for children, for entertainment, and some of the stories are about the origin of many animals, or about how the world was formed. And this particular story was told to me by my father, and also has been written in many books about the raven and how he brought light to the people in Southeast Alaska. When the earth was created, it was totally dark, and people had to live and work in the darkness. And the raven heard about a man that lived on the Nass River that had in his possession some lights that he used for himself. And the raven decided to try to figure out how he could get that light. And he worked on a plan, and he found out after traveling to that area that this particular wealthy man had a daughter. And he made himself small enough, and in some stories it says that it was a small piece of dirt, and others say that it was a pine needle. And he was in the water, some fresh water, and she took the water and drank it. And when he got inside, then she became pregnant. And after the time went by, then she was going to deliver. She was getting ready to deliver the baby, and they made a hole in the ground where the baby was supposed to drop into, and they lined the hole with fine furs because she came from a wealthy family, but the baby wouldn't come. So finally, after a while, they made the decision to put the moss inside the hole where the baby was supposed to drop into. And finally the baby was born. The baby grew quite rapidly. It was the raven. And the grandfather truly loved the baby and allowed him a lot of freedom. And he found the bags of lights that he wanted, and he began to cry for one of the bags. And when they didn't give it to him, he didn't stop crying. And finally the grandfather said, well, just let him have the smallest bag. So they gave him the bag, and he was happy. And he played with it, and pretty soon he opened it up, and it had the stars in it. And he watched as the stars floated out of the bag through the smoke hole. And each of the stars that came out attached itself to the sky, and it was very beautiful, and the stars remained where they came out and attached themselves to the sky. So later on, he began to cry for the next bag, and they didn't give it to him. So it was nonstop crying, and he kept pointing at the bag, and they got really worried because he wouldn't stop crying. And the grandfather said, well, we'll just go ahead and give him the other bag that he's crying for. So they gave him the bag, and he played with it and rolled it around the floor while it was still in the bag. And he was very happy, and after everybody went to bed, he opened the bag, and out came the moon. And the moon floated out through the smoke hole and went up into the sky to give light at nighttime. And after a while, he began to cry for the last bag that was hanging on the wall. It was a much bigger bag, and they didn't want to give him the bag. But he cried and cried to the point where people began to get worried that he would be sick from crying so much. And finally, the grandfather decided that he just couldn't deny his grandson this one thing that he wanted. So he said, go ahead and let him have that last bag. And they gave him the bag, and he was very happy with it. And after playing with it for a while, and when nobody was watching, he turned into a raven, and he held the bag in his mouth and flew out this smoke hole with the bag. And that is where when he was outside, then he released the sun, and that gave daylight to all the people. And he accomplished what he wanted to do.